Hey guys, how's it going? It's been a coincidence these days as I was thinking about doing this recording that it pretty much consistently rained for the last 3 days. As the more perceptive of you might realize, we're going to talk about Noah's Ark, the Great Flood, or the Great Deluge in particular. Now, I think this is a wonderful story. You could go to all the scientific stuff for yourselves if you'd like about how this sort of thing isn't possible and all the repercussions and, you know, of a worldwide flood, but we're not going to get that far into it. What we are going to talk about in the scientific front is the evidence that's seen in regional areas. In many places, all the way where, the Mayans are in South America, uh, some places in Ethiopia, Africa, lots of places in the Middle East, and even a few places in America. There are evidence of a great flood or great floods. Personally, I believe that, you know, floods do happen. We've seen them in our lifetime. Floods to the level that is described in the Bible? Probably. Was it a worldwide event in the way that it said? Probably not. But there is evidence, even in particular in Egypt, about sedimentary rock and layers of mud or dirt that is a perfect example of evidence that would allude to a great flood happening. Aside from all that, let's get into what it means in the Bible. I believe that in the Bible, the Great Flood is a allegory, kind of like a parable, a story that gives some type of message or whatnot, but more so, the allegory. It is not unlike a thought experiment, and I just want to give my interpretations on that. You have a righteous man, Noah, who has his family, who has a direct connection to God, and through this connection has prior knowledge, some something like what certain people would call divine knowledge. Throughout history, you've had either kings, uh, shamans, or people of great importance who have some type of knowledge like that, or who have, futuristic like knowledge, who are seen as righteous men. It was a huge benefit to understand and know the stars, or to know when rain was going to happen, to know when tide was going to happen based off of the movement of the planets or the moon in particular, knowing the zodiac and the changes of times and their angles to know when the most likely times for rain or for floods were going to happen, and you could plan accordingly. So imagine being in the position of Noah, where you're a spiritual man, you have God that is guiding you, who is speaking to you, and you have knowledge of this great flood. Imagine what it would be like if multiple people had, you know, that type of knowledge, logistically speaking. Such a arc, even though they've done multiple calculations on how big it would actually be, whatever, you can take that for what you will. But if multiple people were trying to build the arc at the same time, there could be like a resource problem. There could be infighting. Perhaps that's one of the reasons why only Noah was, made aware. Perhaps only one of these arcs could have been built at the same time. Not to, you know, add on to all the different, you know, animals, species of bugs, or, the whole thing with genetics that has to be involved. This to me shows that it is a allegory, not necessarily a parable. Moving on, you have this wise man, this great man, Noah, divine knowledge, flood is coming. He builds himself an ark, puts all the species on it, brings up his family, and rain for days, storm for days, and that could be indicative of chaos. It is well known in movies, stories throughout history that such rains and storms are known to be put aside, or alongside rather, when certain things are happening to intensify the situation or to place a certain mood on the moment of how terrible things are, or the emotions as well that's going on. This great flood, this storm that goes on for days, could be metaphorical to the things that are happening around this righteous man and by extension this righteous family. All the evil around him, the chaos, the acts, of destruction that the men around or the tribes or whatever around him may have been committing at the time, all the way up until the flood lasts long enough that they all pass. And there's nothing left but this righteous man and his righteous family. So this is where, though I don't believe it's exclusively said in the Bible, that rainbows come from. Rainbows being a symbol that God would never flood the earth like that again. That we're reminded whenever we see a rainbow, which of course is a phenomenon that happens throughout the world. We understand it better now, but it was known to be a symbol that God would not flood the world again. Rainbows typically happen after it's rained, or right before it's going to rain. Saying that if God knew how destructive this flood were to happen, would he actually do it again? I see it as an inconsistency, some may not, but it's worthy to point out that as a allegory, in which case it does make sense, that you have this chaos, and then you have this beautiful thing that becomes like a symbol after the chaos, that there's better times after the chaos. So Noah sends a dove. The dove comes back with a branch, olive branch. Once again, I see this as being riddled with the symbolism. I don't want to get too much into the meaning of the symbolism. You can look it up, but I can point out that a dove with an olive branch or olive branches themselves are used throughout, symbols in multiple different places, countries have different themes. In particular for that area, Middle East and in Europe, but you can make that of what you will. As once again, the boat lands, and everyone, including all the different species, the animals, come out of the boat, and you start humanity all over again. Again, metaphorical here, or allegorical here, where all this chaos, a righteous man hunkers down. He protects what is his, protects what is around him, and whatever he has the capacity to protect for the next generation or next, hundreds, thousands, millions generations. I think that it's a good metaphor. I think it's a good story that people often overlook, or they're automatically inclined to scrutinize, or to say, "Oh, this will be impossible." Like, this has happened. It should not be taken literally. And even Christians themselves at this point say, "Oh, it should not be taken literally." Well, I think it was a mistake for them to believe that it should have been taken literally to begin with. But nowadays, you could still read that same story, still see it for what it is, and take all the lessons from it.